Do not see you. Kathy, there we are. There she is. Just added you in.
Hello.
I'm gonna resume the recording. Hey everybody, how we doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Brian McGill, Director of Partnerships at SIBME. We got an exciting session for you today. I'm gonna play a quick recording to get you guys excited for the reflection cast and welcome our presenter. Let's get it going.
Hey everybody, it's time to get excited for another educator breakout session at the Better Together Summit with the SIBME community. Don't forget, come and do what the cool kids do. Like and follow us at SIBME app on the Facebook. Later today, we'll meet at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time for a reflection cast. We'll be highlighting some of the greatest moments from today's conference and also leading a future forward conversation around the way professional learning is transforming in education. Don't forget, join us in the chat. We'll see you there. Like what you see inside the SIBME platform? Have you ever considered virtual coaching as a strategy to support your organization? Great. Go ahead, take a moment, scan this QR code and share a little bit of information about you, and a SIBME rep will reach out to you. You can also go to www.sibme.com to learn more. And now it's time for the main event. Put your hands together for your SIBME Educator Breakout Presenter.
That was great applause.
We do our best. All right, take it away, Kathy.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm seeing some familiar faces and a couple in here that make me nervous. Hello, Joellen. I'm glad you're here. I love to have you and see you. But I am Kathy Perrett, and I am here just to share a little bit about some of the work that I have been working on this past year, and we're really excited about it. So I thought it would be a perfect time to share with you all. We're going to use just the items in Zoom, so we'll be using the chat feature, so make sure that you have that available. I didn't want to go out and come back in too many places in a 50-minute session, but I will ask you to drop a few things in the chat. And then we will also be using a Zoom breakout later on today, and so Brian will move us into the Zoom breakouts and have us go from there. I'm going to share my screen so I get my slides up, and then the way to see the chat is to just exit out of that full screen so that that chat feature is up so that you're able to see the chat as well and stay connected. So while I'm doing that, why don't you drop in the chat room where you're from. If you have a Twitter handle, I'd love to see what your Twitter is, so that if I don't follow you already, I can, and I will get my screen ready. But I always have a maneuver situation going here. So I am gonna put this out here. And then can everybody see my slides? Is that up okay? You see that, Brian?
Yes, we can see you. Look great.
Okay. And you don't see my chat thing, do you? I just see it on the side.
I'm looking at the chat right now. We got a really active chat. We got Barb in from Hershey, Pennsylvania, Peggy from Mineville, Missouri, Keisha from Rex, Georgia. We are riding high.
Okay, but when I have my chat up, you don't see it on the screen, right? You just see my slides. Okay. So I am going to get started. So we're going to be looking at a topic called coaching through barriers, and we're going to take a look at lack of confidence and overload. And, you know, this topic started pre-COVID-19, but I bet if you're like me, you've probably had some lack of confidence and overload and overwhelm as you've gone through the COVID-19 experience, as we all have. So hopefully some of these tips might even help you as you think about returning to school or returning to remote learning. As I said, we started this before COVID-19 and looking at barriers, and I'll tell you a little bit of that backstory in a moment. I'm seeing if I, oh, there I am. So I am Kathy Perret. I have a little bit of a Bitmoji obsession this summer. I've seen so many great educators getting ready for possible remote learning and using the Bitmoji aspect in classrooms. So this is my little coaching office. I would love to have you just come and sit with me for a while, grab a cup of coffee. I have been so inspired by the authors of the books that you see in the background. Some of my very first work in coaching started with Joellen Killian and Jim Knight. So they kind of brought the idea of instructional coaching to my forefront, even though after I heard about coaching, it was something that I had already been doing in my life. And so I just put a name and a word to it. You can see a little bit about me in the background. I am the co-author of The Coach Approach to School Leadership. I do some consulting with teachers and schools, both on site, hopefully in the future, and virtually. You can see me on Twitter at Kathy Perret. I have a Twitter chat that I co-moderate with a great team that happens on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you want to continue some of the conversation from your sessions Monday and Tuesday, and come on over on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, we'd love to see you at the hashtag EduCoach. And you can see my little pup on my desk. He's my little therapy dog that he used to go to the libraries and do some reading. I'm an avid Iowa State fan. I think Jim Knight says I'm the Iowa State's #1 fan. So he probably just doesn't know any other Iowa State fans, being a Jayhawk fan. And you can see just my love of gardening and the outdoors and plants. And I put this little birdhouse feature in here because if you are doing some Bitmoji work, you know that you work with transparent backgrounds. And I put in the handout a link to a new site that I found called remove.bg, so remove background. And so that's a little picture. The birdhouse stack thing is a craft project that I started doing during COVID-19. I just needed to keep the juices flowing, so I just took some items and stacked them up and glued them. But I took that picture out of my deck and then just used that free tool, remove.bg, and it removed the background. So that was a game changer for me and the whole Bitmoji world of designing something. I dropped a blog post into the handout. If you haven't gotten to the handout, I suggest you pop over to the SIBME huddle, and it's right there. And because we'll be working in and out of that handout as we go. I better get my slides. So, and if you want a copy of the handout, this little URL right here will give you the access to make your own copy, and you will be able to type right in it if that's the way you work best. Otherwise, the PDF is in the SIBME huddle. As a gift to you, I've got another piece in the SIBME huddle. I'm going to do a book giveaway when the session ends. I'll do it after everybody leaves and goes to their lunch breakouts, but I will be giving away 2 copies of The Coach Approach to School Leadership. I'll mail those out free of charge for you, but I will draw those from that sign-up form. And I will also send you a thank you to attending with my coaching organizer. That will sign you up for my newsletter, but if at any time you want to unsubscribe from that newsletter, that is perfectly fine. The form is either at this URL or it's in the SIBME huddle, and you can just click on that and fill that out. And I'll wait until maybe 1 o'clock Central Standard Time to draw. That will give you some time to go back and find that form. So the journey that we've been taking to get to this topic, a long time ago, I started my blog about 2011, and in that process, I met Kenny McKee, and we started our blogs together. We talked coaching together. We've carried on the conversations together, and from those conversations, we started to think about on Twitter, we kind of hear the positives and the good that's coming from coaching, and not to offset that with something negative, but we also know that there are some barriers. We've been coaches ourselves, and there have been times when we've had to figure out how to work in certain situations or with certain teachers that maybe doesn't always come when we're collaborating on a virtual space like Twitter. And so we came up with this topic of there are certain barriers that we do face as coaches. We face them just in our own daily lives. It's not barriers that just teachers have, it's barriers that we have. If you're like me, I have been overwhelmed. I have been, feel like a failure. I have been in situations where I need to change the environment. I've been in situations where I'm overloaded and overwhelmed. And so it's just human nature that we have those feelings. And as a coach, how can we help teachers who might be navigating that space? So before we move to the actual barriers, in the chat, I would just like you to pop in what stops you in your tracks from moving forward to reach a goal. What are some of those barriers that you come up with? I see things like fear of failure, lack of time, overwhelm, analysis paralysis. I love that. Competing goals, too much extra work, all the extra campus stuff. So determining where to start, yes, those are types of things that all happen. Getting started, overthinking, I can be in that overthinking mode a lot. So we've got, you're hitting on many of the barriers that we are addressing, and we know that some of the ones you've worded probably interchangeably go into some of these areas. So a lack of confidence, feelings of being overwhelmed. Those are the two we're going to look at today. Being isolated, having a fear of failure, having some challenging environments that we are working in, and maybe times of disruption. And we thought of these, and we've been working with these all pre-COVID-19, but have we not seen all of these play out in the last 3.5 months? I have witnessed all of these, both within others and within myself. So instead of focusing though on the negative, we want to focus on the positive. So we want to put that lens of the compassionate coaching focus in the forefront, because we do not want us to, as coaches or teachers or mothers, fathers, aunts, and uncles, to name that barrier. We don't want to go up to the teacher and say, oh, we see you're overwhelmed, or we see you have a fear of failure. We want to think, here are some things that look like they're going on. How can I go through a different door in my coaching so that we address that, but in a compassionate way? So we're going to look at some focus areas for all of the barriers we've listed, and then go into the overload and lack of confidence. So very briefly, we're going to look at the barriers that are faced and the lens. Then we're going to explore overload and overwhelm and lack of confidence. We're going to work in some smaller groups with some scenarios and see if you can possibly identify the barrier and what possible ideas you've tried if you've come across that barrier, and then review some possible conversation stems. And I'll keep watching my time so that we fit this all into a 50-minute session. So pop in the chat, what does coaching with compassion mean to you? What would that look like, sound like, if you were coaching with compassion? So I see non-judgmental support, a good listener, taking the other person's perspective, more listening, having empathy. It's going fast, flexible, understanding. So yeah, you're hitting it right on the head with being compassionate. And you know, we've seen the unrest lately in across the country, and just that need to listen. I know I'm trying to listen more, be compassionate, read, have empathy, and we need that same mindset as we are working in coaching. So in this picture, it's one of my favorite in the slides. We can either look at the beautiful trees in the front, colorful, whimsical, makes you happy, or we could see that barrier in the background, the fence that is there. And we want to focus in on the colorful and the whimsical and the happy and bring those elements into our coaching rather than focus in on the barriers. We think of these as seasons teachers are in. It's not that a person is a poor teacher if they happen to have lack of confidence or feel failure or feel overwhelmed. It just happens to be seasons in their professional life that they're in. It could happen in the middle of the year. It could happen at the beginning of the year. I think we're seeing these seasons really play out this summer as teachers are trying to think about what the landscape of school is going to be in the fall. Do I plan for remote learning? Do I plan for face-to-face? If I'm face-to-face, how do we all stay safe and so forth? And so we see that, and we can be the most powerful teacher, yet have some of these barriers that bubble up into different seasons, depending on the situation, the class, the time, the pandemic that happens to be what's taking over most of our minds lately. And so we have these barriers that we've identified, and then we're going to look at just a quick compassionate focus area that we are setting out. So if we have, it's not popping. If we have a lack of confidence, what we're saying is in the compassionate coaching focus would be more of a stronger partnership. We know Jim Knight has his excellent partnership principles and they apply in any situation. But a person who's lacking confidence may need that extra support of partnership or accountability right alongside with them. Not someone telling them what to do, but just partnering every step of the way. The modeling, the co-planning, the co-reflecting, having that strong partnership. If we have a fear of failure, a deeper level of probably more lack of confidence, we want to empower those teachers. We want to figure out how we can build upon their successes, how we can help them feel empowered to make a difference. The teacher who's overwhelmed, or even the coach who's overwhelmed or overloaded, too many things on their plate, coach might be there to help them prioritize those items. I know when I'm overwhelmed, it's the piece that I need to prioritize my goal. What are the top 2 things I'm going to accomplish today? When there's a sense of disruption, we're going to possibly need some routine. I saw that happen. School in Sioux City was let out on Friday. The last day that they had school was Friday, March 13th. And immediately after, in the weeks to come, I saw teachers setting up routines. What are some routines that your child can be doing at home? What are some routines for learning? What are some routines for the teacher professional development? So we had a sense of disruption, but I saw those routines popping into place. we have teachers that feel a lack or a sense of isolation. If it's pre-COVID-19, it might be that you're the only fourth grade teacher. When I taught in Denison, Iowa, I was the only fourth grade teacher. I felt isolated. I didn't know what fourth graders were supposed to be able to do and know and work with. So I felt isolated at times. You might have a high school science teacher who feels isolated, but you might have a team member on a fifth grade team of 6 teachers and the new teacher feels isolated, or the teacher who's trying to use more technology is feeling isolated. And so might need to bring in some areas of connection into their being. And then we've grappled with this whole idea of school culture. And in the beginning, we talked about a toxic school culture, but we've kind of shifted that thinking because we see kind of stages in school cultures. We can have stagnant school cultures. We can have school cultures that have been going through some change, perhaps a new administrator, and so things are changing, a new curriculum. Even this whole pandemic again has created a whole different set of school culture types of things. But I have heard of, it is bringing out the best in staffs and pulling them together so that they have the mentality that they're in this together to help their students. And so an openness. A lot of times you'll hear that whole elephant in the room piece, and that the elephant just keeps growing. Well, if we are open enough to name that elephant and then move forward. We had a last one in here. We've taken it out. I left the space just in case we happen to have another one pop in, but these are the areas that we're taking a look at. We finish up this book in 2 months, so it's due at the end of August. And then I'm not sure what the editing process will be and when it will be out, but it will address these areas. Just pop in. What's on your mind? What are you thinking about as I introduce those barriers? Well, thank you, Keisha. Anything popping in your mind right now? You've felt these barriers as a new teacher, and how you can be an effective coach through distance learning. I think this whole virtual piece, I've been virtually coaching coaches for about 6 years now, and even if you're a coach in your building, using tools like Zoom and so forth can help us in that connecting with our teachers. So now pop in the chat, just what do you think, what is the difference for you between overwhelm and lack of confidence? Can you see a way to describe that, so how they're different or how they're similar? Or if you can think of an example in your life that fits one of them. Yeah, I hear a lot of, in the chat, I hear a lot of just, you're just so unsure about what school's going to look like in the fall. I hear that from coaches and teachers all over. So the lack of confidence is, I don't know how to do this or where to start. Lack of confidence is that you're unsure on how to accomplish something. So even just, we're unsure how to accomplish coaching in the virtual world, or we're unsure of how to support our teachers through all of this. Overwhelmed, not sure which way to go. So great. And I think the chat gets saved into the huddle, if I've understood right from other sessions. So it will be good to even go back to and see. So when we're looking at overwhelm, and you've really hit that process too, and we're looking at that, That overwhelmed feeling or that overload feeling is just that swirl, that busyness, the time management, the stress, the rush, the delays, and so forth. And so what we're really saying is it's not advancing. We don't really have the time to do everything well. There's just so many things on our plates, and I hear that from coaches time and time again. Whereas if we have a lack of confidence, we've got a lot of questions swirling in our mind, and we feel like we maybe don't have the skills to do the things well. Well, that's kind of our distinction, and a lot of your narratives in the chat room have addressed that as well. So we break these down then into a little bit more. So if we're in that state of overwhelm, we want to help teachers prioritize their goals. So that is one, and then we will provide strategies. The session's just too short to provide minute strategies inside that, but just how do we help prioritize goals? How do we get creative with time? That teacher that's overwhelmed or overloaded, the last thing they're probably going to want to do is to go through a coaching cycle during their break time with, when they're trying to plan for the next session with kids. And so how can we get creative with time? It might be that to address some self-care, but it's not to just name it. It's just to think about how and where we coach. So if I was a coach back at a school that I taught with, it might say, how about for our reflective conversation, we just walk around the block or go walk around the football field that was just outside my classroom door across the playground. Might just be get up and move. It might just be that walk and talk. Maybe it is an ability to meet off-site. That sometimes that's pretty impossible, but maybe it is virtual. Maybe we do have that 15-minute conversation. I had a colleague at my last workplace is doing a lot more virtual work even pre-COVID-19, but it provided some self-care for the teachers and some of that reflection time. When we look at the lack of confidence and we see that the focus is a partnership, we want to make sure, that we have those achievable goals. Someone said in the chat is like, I just don't know how to start, how to get started. So breaking things down in small steps. When I coach coaches and they want to have a coaching cycle go, we just break it down in small steps. So this week, let's try this. Now next week, let's come back and talk about this. Getting to that stair step of what they want to see happen. Bringing in some areas of self-efficacy, helping them see what they're most proud of, that their students can do. What are their strengths and build upon their strengths. Focusing in on that growth mindset, celebrating the things that have been accomplished is another good way to address that barrier. And that sustained support. They're probably going to be the ones who will appreciate the co-teaching, co-modeling, co-reflecting going on in a coaching cycle. So I'm watching my time and I want to be able to get to the breakout room. So I'll let you kind of think what's in your mind and your head so that we can get to our breakout so we have enough time to do this. So I want to get you in smaller groups so that you can talk some things over. Me talking at you is not always the best way to learn. So I've introduced to you the lack of confidence and overload, overwhelm. Those are the two barriers we're going to take a look at. And you're going to meet James and Aaron and Ann and Mark. And they're going to have a scenario in the handout. So I'll let you know where those are in a minute. But so Mark's scenario is going to be short paragraph. And in that scenario, then you're going to if you go into breakout room 1 and, you know, when your breakout starts, it'll say you're entering room 1 or you're entering room 2. So whichever room you entered, kind of be cognizant of that. And so if you're entering room 1, you're reading through the scenarios of Mark, Aaron, Ann, and James, and whichever ones you get to, you're going to try to name the barrier, whether it's overload or a lack of confidence, or I interchangeably use overwhelm. Jot down a little bit of the evidence that you might see. It doesn't have to be a long narrative, a word or two that pop to your reason why that was the barrier. And then rather than me give you a lot of strategies, I just want you to talk over what might have you done if you had Mark as a person that you were coaching, or if Mark was a colleague on your team, or if Mark was another teacher in the school somewhere and you were mentoring him, or whatever your scenario is. You may not have time to get through all of the scenarios, but I want you to have that conversation around them. So I'm going to exit out of my screen sharing a minute so I can just show you where that handout is. So if you're in, actually I probably should, if you're in the huddle, there should be a handout, and just let us know if you're not seeing where that handout is. And I don't know, Brian, if there's a way to drop the link into it from the huddle.
So the handout from the huddle.
Yeah, is there a way?
Okay.
So
Well, I'd advise everybody to go to the huddle to get that link. Let me see here, but I will try to go ahead and.
yeah, so someone's got the scenarios up. Yep, that one goes. Can't log into today. What can't log into what, Wendy?
Okay.
Yep, so that
And
one,
we want this handout, right? It says coaching.
it's got all little bit emojis and everything on it.
I can't tell.
Or I can share my screen and show what it looks like. I'll go to link maybe.
There it is, right there. Better Together, Transforming Professional Learning.
Yep.
At the top. Okay. I'm gonna, the thing is, the problem is that because Sydney's security because of FERPA and COPPA compliance securities we put in place, you can link from outside the platform in. It's hard to link. You can't link from inside the out without having access to the password, your account
okay.
to get in.
So I mean, it looks like the link to the scenarios was popped in, like
So many of you are logged into SIDME, so you would be able to go directly to this resource. If you needed to do this, if you're new to SIDME, you received an email with your login credentials at the beginning of the conference from TJ
yeah.
Hoffman.
And so I see people are getting at least to the scenarios. So even if you're not to the record recording place, that's okay. It was a way for me to kind of watch the conversation. So if you can at least get to the scenarios, which we've popped in, and read through, talk about them, evidence, and then maybe we'll share a few examples of what you talked about when we come back. So Brian, how about if you put them into breakouts for probably about, we've got till 12:10, probably for about 8 to 10 minutes, and let them have some conversations around that, and then we'll come back together.
I'm gonna put you guys in groups of 5 or 6.
Go have fun.
All right, 1 second. I'm running my calculator. All right.
I see familiar faces. Oh, I'm going to a breakout too.
Everybody gets a breakout room. All right, everybody. All right, I see you. I'm in a breakout room with Christina, Kimberly, and Jocelyn. You guys want to lead this conversation? Where are we coming in from? Look like, let's see, Kimberly Allen. Looks like you're supposed to go, Kimberly, you're supposed to go to breakout room 3. So you should have a pop-up that you're going to click to go to your breakout room. Same with you, Jocelyn. I assume maybe you're at the All right, everybody's coming back in. All right, we'll give everybody, it looks like 20 seconds left.
Oops.
See here. All right,
So is everybody coming back?
that's right, Kathy, we got everybody coming back.
That sounds good. I'm going to share my screen again to get to my PowerPoint, my slides, whatever they are. So I'm going to go over to a different one though here. So I'm going to advance here. I'm not in present mode. Okay, so you went through some of the scenarios. You looked at if you could identify the barrier. I know the breakout room I was in was having good conversation around the evidence and the possible ideas to do. So here we have our friends that we met, and I know you probably didn't have time to go through them all. We've kind of identified James and Aaron as kind of being that overload, but you know, in our conversation, others, you know, could have popped into other barriers. Maybe pop in the chat room if you read James or Aaron, what might be a way that you might have helped James or Aaron, or even just conversation that you had, or if you want to take with the mic, that's fine. And we kind of saw that Mark and Ann had a lack of confidence. So it might have been ways to prioritize, help one of these guys prioritize what's going on, making a list of what she might need to do. A strategy for Aaron might to think about the competing priorities and how they align to things. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I liked what Randall just put in the chat, because that was one of the things that I had suggested was having them see like how do these things align. If you have all of these different initiatives and trying to see, you know, you kind of feel like, you know, a chicken with your head cut off trying to get at all these things. But I think if you were able to see like, okay, how do these things, what are the similarities? What are some of the things that I can put together, and then like kind of kill two birds with one stone. If I address this, I'm also addressing that. And
Right.
sometimes teachers get overwhelmed because they don't see that connection.
Yep. Great point.
I also think it'd be important to chunk some of the new priorities. So oftentimes when the building has new initiatives, everything doesn't have to be implemented in September. So helping them figure out what are those, helping her Erin prioritize which one of these things do we need to do first, and how can I help you get those particular things going, and then in October we'll focus on this piece.
Yep. And giving them permission to do that, because you know they may not feel like they can, you know, they see it as I have to do all of these. So any on the lack of confidence side with Mark and Ann, was there anything that popped in there? If you read either one of those.
One of the things that I know we talked about in Erin was also obviously she's good at what she does, so maybe asking her like, what does she feel that she needs the most support in? Because she might not need support in everything. It may just be that one thing, and really focus in on that one area.
Right. right. Has a lot swirling, but focusing it in on one.
My group seems to be a little bashful, but we talked about that
But you're
Mark.
not, Keisha.
Not at all, not at all. So I'm not struggling with that lack of confidence. That's not my issue. We did talk about the fact that said Mark had seen some training in him not having necessarily the confidence to implement those champ strategies, that the coach could model it in the room with his students, those classes that he was finding most challenging, so that he could see that it could be done with that particular group, because that was the group that he was struggling with. And then that would also allow him to have some confidence just by seeing that it could work with his kids.
Yeah, very good point.
I think that this is where your compassion really comes in. He's just a second year teacher. He doesn't have the success under his belt. So what Keisha was saying about modeling and saying, hey, we've all been through this. This is something new. You're going to get it. It's just going to take some time and some experience.
Yep. No, the modeling and the compassion are key through probably any one of these barriers. I know we just have about 4 minutes left. Very briefly, just, when we're having those conversations with teachers, I've learned through my years to keep those conversations simple, to help them engage in reflection, to yield to others, the perspective of others, that listening, so that they're doing the reflecting, and keeping our conversations focused on the students and some solutions, because when we're in these barriers, it can be very easy to go down the negative path, and how can we help turn that around? One of the books that has really helped me in that area is The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stainer. And he has in it a series of questions. I'm just going to pop them in real fast. They're in the handout. These have really helped me guide my conversations with teachers and with coaches that I coach, to give the reflection back to them. I know in my beginning years as a coach, I painstakingly wrote out all these questions, and I was almost trying to steer the conversation somewhere where these just take it at a level of where that teacher is at and let the reflection come from them. So if you haven't read the book, I highly suggest it. I think I mentioned in the handout, if you're an Amazon Prime member, it almost appears like it's free in part of Amazon Prime, so for your Kindle. So it might be an opportunity for you. And then we're not going to have time to go through these deeply. We're trying to come up with possible sentence starters to help in the barriers. So the teacher that's feeling overloaded, you've mentioned several times, just what's pressing, what's most important, how can we let go of some things, kind of taking the conversation possibly that way. That's in the handout, so you can study that a little bit more. This may change as we finish up the book, but kind of going down that path right now. And then for the lack of confidence, just, again, the strengths that they have and what are they most proud of, and what's getting in their way of, doing something, having those conversations. How do they learn best? Because how can you partner together? Just bringing those things to the forefront. I'm not going to go through these two scenarios. We can apply these to if you are a coach yourself and helping you with your lack of confidence as a coach, or helping you with your overload, or any of them. So I'm not going to go to these stories. But as we end, I want you to maybe think about who is your teacher that you might be working with who does feel overloaded or overwhelmed right now. And even though it's summer, what can you do to be helping them as they prepare for next year? And we know that the preparation for next year is something totally different than any one of us have ever experienced. Or who is your teacher that is lacking confidence and helping them through? So we've got our barriers. We think that a personalized coaching approach can help empower those teachers as they shift through the different environments that they are in and the situations that they come up against. I've put this reflection in the handout. I've also put it in a discussion chat in the huddles. So if you want to pop in some ideas, take a sentence starter and reflect on it in the huddle, that'd be great. Or if you want to reflect on your own, that's perfect. Ways to get a hold of me. That slide's also in the huddle where I think those links are active then, but I'm very active on Twitter. Not as active on Instagram, and sorry, you get food pictures every once in a while. But ways to reach out to me. Love to partner with you in the journey, whatever you're doing. So I love the opportunity to be able to help you. Thanks for all you do for teachers. And with that, I will see if Brian has any closing remarks before everybody grabs a lunch.
I just want to say thank you all. Thank you, Kathy, for a great discussion. Really put your hands together for another Kathy Perrette session. It's always a joy, one of my favorites. We will, if any of you will be at the Learning Forward conference, Kathy Perrette has a big session on virtual coaching. And if you have any colleagues going, please send them to her session. If you would like to learn more about SIBME and SIBME virtual coaching, SIBME services, feel free to share a little bit of information with us or go to www.sibme.com. I do have this quick little link for you to share to share a little bit about yourselves and see if it makes sense for us to do any business together. We do have lunch. You know, what was really cool about lunch yesterday? I got to sit down and meet folks from all over across the country. Just like we were coast to coast here in this session, you'll have a coast to coast lunch session. So thank you for participating in today's session. We'll see you out there.
Thank you, everybody.